This animated cartoon grabbed the Academy Award. Here's the beautiful theme.
呼んでいる胸のどこか奥でいつも心躍る夢を見たい悲しみは数えきれないけれどその向こうできっとあなたに会える
Cutie, honey.
Welcome back to the Pitchy and Palscast with just Matt this week. Now, at the time of taping this, it is just about when AvCon, Adelaide's Anime and Video Games Festival, is coming to a close. I have done all my obligations for that event this weekend, so I decided to make Matt watch more anime. Because something came up last week as we discussed the film that made him want to die, and that is that you haven't actually seen any of the actual classics, the mainstream anime titles in movie form. So I thought, let's do that. Let's do some very mainstream stuff. Let's talk about the man, the one and only. He's like Walt Disney, but he's Japanese. Hayao Miyazaki. How are you feeling right now, Matt?
Okay. It's very just easy and calm, considering we've had such a low bar coming in from what we had to do last week, that I feel like you could have probably put on anything and it would have been okay. You could have put on one of the most boring movies of all time and I would have been fine with it, just to get away from such awfulness. But
You're tempting fate there, Matt. Is it time for Hard to Be a God next week?
But no, these two movies we're going to talk about, I did not hate.
Yay!
So that is good.
I do recall there was a review by someone of The Last Jedi which opened... No, it was Justice League, which opened with, I didn't hate it. And then just slapped that on the screen in big bold letters. So I guess I'll do some usual background. I've been hesitant to do Hayao Miyazaki films, mostly because I don't feel like I can add much to any sort of discourse. He's probably the most analysed creator in the whole of Japanese animation. His films are well known, they're well covered, well discussed. You could read stuff by anyone from Roger Ebert to Helen McCarthy, and you'll get insight into him. So, super quick rundown. He's an animator. He worked for a bunch of studios in the 70s. He met a bunch of people, and together they started coming up with ideas, decided to break away and make their own studio. Before that, he directed 2 feature films, a Lupin the Third feature film. Lupin the Third is a pulp action franchise, and his entry is interesting, and we'll do that one sometime, because parts of his worldview very much shape his interpretation of the characters of that franchise, resulting in a text which is still Lupin, but at the same time is still undeniably a Hayao Miyazaki film. After that, he did the film Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, which is one of my favourite films of his. That's where he really starts ramming down signature parts of his oeuvre, in particular the conflict between humanity and nature and the need to have an environmental conservationist movement, as well as strong female characters, though that also does pop up in Castle of Cagliostro. With Nausicaa, it was with an existing studio. I am tired. I've been working pretty much for 48 hours straight, so I'm tired. my brain not work so good. I'll probably cut this whole and not excuse myself. But so with Nausicaa, they couldn't make a original film. The studio only wanted adaptations. So Hayao Miyazaki wrote a comic, got it published, and then said he was adapting the comic, but then used none of the content of the comic in his original film. That film did pretty well, and gained very good critical reception. In America, it had an atrociously butchered, heavily edited release called Warriors of the Wind, which is bad, to say the least, and is very much one of those moments, along with, say, Robotech, that really impacted English-speaking anime fandom's paranoia of editorial process. After Nausicaa, him, Isao Takahata, Joe Hisaishi, all the Ghibli cool people made Studio Ghibli, and their first feature film was Laputa. So I figured, let's go there. From memory, it's been a while since I'd last seen it. So, from memory, it was a pretty good one, and one of the more straightforward action films. So I figured we'd do that, And of course, we will do Spirited Away, the Academy Award-winning Best Animated Feature Film, only non-American film to ever achieve this award. Spirited Away. As a couple of more points here, Spirited Away was the first film Hayao Miyazaki made after his first retirement. He intended Mononoke Hime in 1999 to be his final film. Then he decided to come out and make this one. He announced he was retiring again. Then his son said he was working on a film, so Hayao Miyazaki came out of retirement a second time to make another film to bury the fact that his son was making a film. He does not get along with his son. Hayao Miyazaki is an arsehole. I think that's the other thing that's fairly well known these days. He's very much someone who you would say, and I kind of want to do like Tales of Earthsea and The Disaster Artist, because the Disaster Artist as a book, and especially its film adaptation, very much ask the question, is it okay to be an arsehole if you make good art? And it comes down very strongly on the side of, yes, I disagree, and Hayao Miyazaki's an arsehole. Anyway, that quite often impacts how I'm feeling when I'm watching his films. But the other thing to mention, I guess in my personal experiences, is first film I saw of his was Castle of Cagliostro on a tape when I was about 11. Then when Spirited Away came out, that popped up and I saw that. And I was about 13 at the time, and that was a moment of awakening for me in how I engaged with media. Because it was the first time I really, really got the concept of semiotic readings, that images have meanings behind them, and you interpret these to gain information. And so, early on in this film, when Chihiro's parents go and start stealing a bunch of food and eating it, greedily gulping down that food in strange, creepy animated ways, and then they turn into pigs, my brain went, I get it. They're greedy, and now they've turned into icons of greed. So my brain's saying, yeah, I get this. This is a bit on the nose. And then, when the witch says, they were greedy, so I turned them into pigs, I was out. I was done. And that's always tainted my feelings whenever I've gone back to Spirited Away. Is just, this film always feels a bit too on the nose. Tonight was the first time I viewed it in about 5 years. And I've changed as a person since the last time I saw it. I understand more about certain facets of both the culture that's being depicted and certain things about the craftsmanship of filmmaking. And I came out feeling a lot better and more positive about the film than I ever have before. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Sorry, are we talking about Spirited Away then? First?
Oh, that was just me getting around rambling mess here. I guess, so we've seen 2 gaps in a creator's career. I think the first big gap that really, really struck me with the films is not Hayao Miyazaki, but lead composer Joe Hisaishi, and how radically better he is at constructing film scores by Spirited Away. Where none of the soundtrack, it sounds like a movie score. It has leitmotifs, it has tempo, it fits with the pacing of scenes, it adds to the mood of scenes, and the theming of scenes, whereas Laputa is much more rough. It has that lower budget 80s vibe where sometimes you just get a bunch of heavy synthesizers, and oftentimes it becomes quite jarring, and unfortunately that's just a sign of the times. There's a bunch of works in that era.
Yeah,
across everywhere in the world which have that sort of issue, particularly in the 80s, and that one really does stick out and does at times make certain scenes in Laputa more annoying than they should be, I think.
Yeah, that was one of the things I did know. To be fair, in terms of the sound in general with Laputa, I did enjoy the Foley a lot. It is still Foley, right, with animated films. It's just...
Yeah, we just call it Foley.
Yeah. I remembered right from the start, just with the sound effects of the gunfire, the vehicle sounds, even the buzzing, weird insects, vehicles were flying ships were kind of fun. Like, just all that was really good. But you are right, I think the soundtrack, I think jarring is a good way to put it, because it was something that would always take you out of the scene. It wasn't something that it never seemed to fit with what was going on, like visually, and I think that was probably definitely a weak point. for Laputa, that was not the case in Spirited Away.
So I guess we should summarize the plots of the two films that we saw. Would you like to summarize Laputa to the best of your memory?
Oh god.
Would you like me to do it if that's how you're going to be, or shall we laugh at your misery and your failure?
I think the worst part about me doing Laputa is I think there's some stuff in the middle that I didn't quite get, so it's probably better if you did Laputa at the very least.
Alrighty, so we begin in medias res, everyone's favourite fancy term to sound like they understand film. That is to say, it begins with an airship flying through the sky, and it gets attacked by some pirates. A girl atop on board that ship has a MacGuffin. It's a stone pendant. By MacGuffin, I mean a important item relevant to the plot. And in attempting to escape from these pirates, she falls out of the ship. The opening credits then show all these neat storyboards for this steampunk version of the 1920s, where there's flying ships and things. It's all very nice. And she falls down, and the magic pendant causes her to start floating as she falls to the ground. We then meet our actual lead character. I mean, I guess we could say this film has two leads, but certainly the protagonist is the boy. Pazu? It's Pazu, isn't it?
Yeah, Pazu.
Yes, Pazu. Pazuzu! Yes, everyone loves ancient pagan gods. So, okay. I've got to be saying Pazuzu all night now. So I need to get that out of my system.
We just have to say as many times as possible.
Alright, Pazu. So, Pazu is a blue-collar worker working in the mines. Young boy, he finds the girl. She calls herself Cheetah. And then very, very quickly, action escalates. He establishes that his dad once saw a flying castle in the sky, but then his dad died, and no one believes him. So he's motivated by this idea, and is clearly an enthusiastic kid who wants adventure. Finds the girl. Pirates are chasing the girl, so they start to run away. This begins what is basically half an hour straight of chase scenes, as they're running away from these pirates. They run away from the pirates, some people in the town help them hide from the pirates. Then, as they're running away from the pirates, the military also appears, of this indeterminate country, and the military starts trying to fight the pirates, but it turns out the military is also after the girl. And as the boy and the girl manage to flee both of these, they wind up in a mine where we get some information about the pendant being made of a very special crystal, which can do things. It can do cool magitech things. From there, the girl gets kidnapped. She gets captured by the military, and it turns out there's a bit of internal conflict going on between the military and a secret branch of some sort of CIA guy who's been studying ancient magitech and wants to take it for himself. So, he has the kids for a bit, then sends the boy out. The boy then teams up with the pirates to try and rescue the girl. At this time, the girl accidentally activates an ancient robot made of the magitech that her pendant uses. Then that robot goes haywire for a bit. And it's often, we'll get to that when we get into the deep dive, but I guess I'm just running around here. So there's a robot, smashes the place up. In this ensuing confusion, the boy and the pirates manage to rescue Cheetah. It also turns out that she's descended from the people who made the big flying castle, and all this weird magitech that's popping up. They then decide to work with the pirates to go to the castle. Meanwhile, the military continues to pursue them. They duke it out in the sky for a bit. They all wind up in the castle. As they get to the castle, you have your usual third act. End of second act, start of third act, low points. People running around having some bit of fighting and chasing. And the villain, the evil guy from the not CIA, manages to acquire ownership of the castle. Starts to try to use it as a giant Death Star with an army of robots that will follow his beck and call. But then, it's set up earlier in the film that there's a bunch of neat spells you can do if you've got the magic pendant. And this is used to use the spell that is basically the self-destruct spell. And they decide that it's better to destroy the castle and not let anyone have this extremely powerful magitech, rather than potentially let the wrong people have it. So they do so. A lot of people die. A lot of jobbers just fall to their deaths horrifyingly. The main villain dies. And everyone's happy. The end.
I think a few things that I'm going through my head while you were going through it bit by bit. One, I'm happy that I got most of it. I think the bit that I was a bit unsure about is I feel like I blinked and suddenly the first robot, was killing everyone or like destroying things, and I was like, I must have missed something there. I feel like I blinked and something that was happening. And I was like, did I miss something here? But apparently it's just...
Yeah, it's basically she just activated it and it was trying to protect Cheetah.
Sure.
Which is short for Lou Cheetah. She's very creative in how she creates pseudonyms. And then, yeah, so it's just in the process of protecting her, it starts opening fire on everything.
Okay. Yeah, I think the second thing was just like, when you say it out loud and just go run through the whole plot, you realize just how dumb this movie is. I think especially the way that it seems to start like your basic adventure movie, which, if I'm honest, I kind of wish it was, even though I want to strive for something more interesting or something more complex. I think this movie would have done its best as just a straight adventure story of trying to find, some mystical location, in this case, a floating castle.
Yeah, there's this old joke in screenwriting, which is, hey, how are you going with your script? Oh, it's really great. All I need to do is write my second act. With, of course, the joke being that the second act, which is where things get the most complicated, is by far the hardest part of a story to structure out. And, oh boy, does this one have a messy second act. There's just there's unnecessary bouts of people getting captured. There's fights that don't really need to happen here. There's these long stretches of exposition that just wear it all down. This was, especially since this was really the first time I've actually been able to rest my body over the course of this convention. So I'm just suddenly falling asleep, which doesn't happen to me when I'm watching films. As you've probably noticed in the times that we've been doing this show, like, I'm switched on and usually making some sort of natter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it really struggled, between... Like, it felt like there was... Obviously, we talked about as you were saying, with the whole human versus nature kind of thing. And so there is that kind of a theme there. And I think it just really struggled with trying to do something with that, and probably something a bit more complex with, like, the different, factions of humans. There's the pirates, there's the government, there's the military. I feel like in a different story, you could actually talk a little bit about maybe maybe they're living in a world that is struggling a little bit, or maybe the nation that they're in is in a war, or you give some sort of reason for why these different factions are so wanting to get to Laputa. The pirates are the only ones that really have a motivation I can really get behind, and that they're just the simple.
They want money.
They just want money.
Yeah, I think the key to it, and the key to the structural issues this film has, is, as I mentioned, it begins in medias res. It wants to throw you right into the inciting action that gets everything going, but it then means you spend, like I said, like half an hour in these really creative, fun chase scenes, but you do not actually know who anyone is and why you should care, or even what's really at stake beyond some people want the girl. So it then has to backtrack a bit and just halt all this momentum that it's been building and getting you along the ride for, to say, okay, let's actually find out who the hell anyone is. And this is where having that initial status quo is so valuable for understanding who people are and why you should give a damn.
I think that we talked about the second act being the problem. It probably was, out of the three acts, it was definitely the most problematic. But I think that if they wanted to have... The first act also has its problems, because if they needed to decide whether they wanted to have a complex story about humans dealing with technology or nature, sort of, that they don't really understand, or if they just wanted to have a fun action-adventure. And I think if they just wanted to have an action-adventure, the in media res wouldn't have been as much of a problem, because you wouldn't have that much plot to go through in the second act. But because they couldn't decide which way they wanted to go, the fact that they had that in media res means that second act, like, it means it's fine for that first act a little bit, but especially once it gets into the middle of the movie, it just hits a dead stop, and it just gets boring and just not that fun to watch.
And And it's all the worse because, while it does quite handle its ultimate themes quite well, a lot of the film's visuals don't really build to this sort of sense. Because a lot of what it really does is show this very lovingly crafted depiction of a working-class mining town at the turn of the century. And so it's all about, like, there's various forms of technology, some of which are a bit more stable than others, and there's frequent depictions of, like, miners having the plight of trying to acquire more resources, but it's not framed as, oh, it's terrible, we're over-mining. It's just, hey, that happens when you're mining. And all the townspeople are depicted as quite friendly and cooperative and quite playful in the way that they'll do things, even when they're sticking out for fellow downtrodden proletariat. They'll still happily have some brawls if they get the opportunity, that sort of thing. So then you've been watching this movie for well over an hour, when suddenly it's now depicting idyllic landscapes and the like. And it's just, well, okay, now where's this coming from? I didn't want to compare things to Nausicaa too much since we didn't watch it, but Nausicaa is a lot better at maintaining visuals that match its thematic content. Not only is it about, hey, we should stop wars, also we should respect nature all the way through, the opening scene of the film is two characters exploring a heavily polluted, toxic ruin while wearing gas masks. So straight away, you are seeing what the film is going to be telling you about.
Yeah,
and Spirited Away is like that as well. Spirited Away is quite good at establishing, hey, here's where the emotional state of Chihiro is, and here's things are gonna steadily get weirder and weirder and weirder as you get embroiled in the world of yokai. And so, like, it's really just Laputa is really wonky with this.
Yeah, I think the obvious place to go with that is just that you say this is the first movie that Studio Ghibli did.
Yeah, the first is a studio, but most of that creative team worked on Nausicaa.
Okay. I was going to say the obvious, and maybe that'd be wrong, but what I was going to say was that you would see a progression of, this movie was very confused, it could just be that maybe while they were experienced, perhaps with a different studio, it's a different environment.
Yeah.
Perhaps they were, in some way, just not comfortable while making this film. Maybe there are other problems that I don't really know. It definitely feels like a confused movie compared to, at least, the movie that I saw afterwards, Spirited Away. And that's probably its biggest problem, really. It doesn't stick with either a genre or with its own themes very well. So yeah.
And even when it's being an 80s action movie, it does come off as weird. It's equal parts refreshing and perplexing, since it maintains the visuals and tone of a family-friendly movie. But then you just get these Gatling guns, and you see a man pistol whip a boy in the head, and attempt to shoot that boy in the head with a gun, and when that doesn't work, yell to a soldier, use a grenade instead. There's this level of violence, and this is something that's present all through, particularly 70s and 80s anime. Whereas just creators are very much testing what they can get away with. So it's like, there's an episode of 70s children's show Combat La Vie, where the villains all, hey, these heroes keep using their combining robot to defeat me, but they wouldn't be able to pilot it if they have no arms, so he runs up to the lead pilot and chops off one of his arms. Like, things like that were happening and was somewhat in the culture of production at that time. And so this is really that turning point of when films, I think, the big budget, mainstream, family-oriented entertainment animated films really started to move away from this. I think Laputa's the last one to have that sort of weirdly realistic violence going on. It's great, though.
It is great. We were talking about, like, the big issues or the big things about this movie, but, like, just that one scene, basically this is during the third act, when Pazuzu, he's attempting to stay away from the military who are trying to kill him. Just that one line of, hey, it's that kid. And then it's one of it's one of the government guys, I believe.
Yeah.
And he just, as he says this, he just pulls out a revolver and just starts shooting at him.
Yeah, it's not some sort of sci-fi gun. It is straight up a Smith & Wesson single-action army revolver.
It's that, and there's another scene where
Colt, sorry, that's by Colt. The Single Action Army's by Colt.
Very important. That's the most important piece of information you will get.
Did you see their Renegade Card video on Death Wish that came out 2 days before this?
Not unfortunately. The scene when Pazu and Sheeta's trying to give Pazu the MacGuffin through the tiny little gap, and she does it, and then as she's able to give it to him, they're like trying to get they got into a little crevasse that they're trying to put their hands into. She gives it to him, and then the bad guy pulls her out of the way, and then you just see a gun
Yes!
pointed at the kid's head, and he barely pulls away.
Yeah, he just pulls away. Earlier, a bullet actually grazes his cheek as well. It's so good. Man, I kind of want to show you Idion be invoked now. Just for the scene where a kid's head gets knocked off with a rocket launcher.
Oh my God. You were laughing at a scene earlier in the movie. Unfortunately, that was around the time where I was starting to lose because it was in the second act. But I think there was a rocket launcher next to a...
Yeah, it's just, while they're on the pirate ship and you see the captain, and you just see the arsenal she has next to her bed, and there's there's a cutlass, there's a revolver, I think there's a shotgun, and there's just an RPG-1 rocket launcher.
The technology in this movie is interesting. Great. But also great. I think the only times when I'm not enjoying it so much is when they talked about the actual spells. I'm okay with the technology being so advanced that it's basically magic. That's fine to me, especially because that's kind of the point I think of the whole trying to get to this promised land, this mystical castle they're trying to get. So the fact that it's
it's that pursuit of some degree of godhood and absolute dominion, and the ultimate point being that there's power that men should not have.
Yeah. So that I was pretty much fine with, but when they actually brought in the spells, that was when it kind of lost me a little bit, and that was not so fun. I would say though, with back to the violence, it's the kind of thing where, and it's something that I've been thinking about a bit lately, with things that are good in a vacuum, but perhaps not great for the art piece overall.
Yes, in context.
Yeah, in that the violence is fun, but it does clash with, is this a kid's show? Is this a fun action adventure? What is this? And I think especially when it comes to how confused the movie is, it means that you can have main problem with having a movie that doesn't really know what it's doing exactly. It means that you can have scenes that are good in a vacuum, but don't really help the movie.
Yeah, don't lead to that good vibe when you leave the film.
Yeah. And
I think it's something to mention there is that because these are entirely fictional people and you don't really know what the status of the state is, because I was going to bring up a comparison to Indiana Jones, as that's some good fun action-adventure films, and there's a lot of murder in them. Really good murder. But the key thing is, it's fucking Nazis! You know that these are supporters of a fascist regime that wants systemic extermination of anyone who it believes is Jewish. Here we have... Who are these guys? They're an army, but they're frequently depicted as childish and incredibly petty. And it's so I don't want to see these guys dying because they're just a bit childish and greedy.
Yeah, I think we were just laughing. I think all of us were laughing a lot at those scenes. But I think we were laughing at the absurdity of them.
Yes.
It was more of we were laughing at the movie rather than with the movie.
Yes.
And I feel this is a bit of a segue, so I'm sorry if I wanted to keep talking about that. But I did feel one of the things that really didn't work for me was the comedy in general.
Yes.
For this film, it was very, I guess maybe slapstick is the term, very childish, very simple. And I think I would try and rationalize it by saying that it doesn't work with what the movie's trying to do, especially with the more heavy kind of themes. But it might also just be a subjective thing where that's never been a kind of comedy that has really appealed to me.
Yeah. Visual comedy is very hard to execute well. And comedy is one of the genres that will die the fastest. And the reason for this is because comedy is built entirely around violating norms. There are things that you think are normal, and humor is derived from the unexpected, that you're doing things that aren't normal, and you go, huh. And norms change over time. They can change quite quickly. based on political events, cultural events, growth of people as they get older and the experiences they have lived. And so comedy will die very quickly because what you think is normal is very different to what you thought was normal even 2, 3, 10, 20 years ago. But something I really wanted to bring up here now that we're onto the comedy is there's a running gag where all the pirates are basically silly young boys mentally. And they've just got their woman who makes sure that they're all actually somewhat working efficiently. And it's whatever, they're childish, whatever. The problem is it means that they're trying to play off jokes where they're all young boys who are shy around the lead girl and maybe they like want to date her and marry her like a kid would think marriage is like. But when you have a large group of grown men leering at a girl who's been made to do a bunch of domestic chores, like, that is creepy as hell. That is very concerning. It's humor that does not land, and it comes with these very potentially abusive implications, which thankfully it doesn't do anything with. And you could say, well, it's just Japan, or it's just the times, but like, this would have been bad in 1986 anywhere. And it really, really hurts the text now in 2018.
It's pretty bad. It's like, there's almost not much you can really say about it, other than just like, when I watched it, it was something that really jarred me. And it was just like, I almost couldn't believe it was happening. Like, it just felt really disgusting, to be honest. It was, and yeah, so, yeah. There's not much else really to say other than it was a disgusting little moment. And
the film is kind of simple, and so our points can be quite simple in response, I think.
Yeah, I think in some ways the movie saved itself in that because it was so confusing, because it kind of just dropped things every once in a while. The fact it saved itself there in that it didn't go any further with it.
Yes.
It was like literally one scene, and it was like, whoa. And then, so the only good thing you can say about it is that it moved on from it very, very quickly, but it's still...
Yeah, it's all the weirder because it's a Hayao Miyazaki film and he's usually very careful about that sort of content. Yeah. It's just, growing pains. And they can hurt texts. There's better ones you can watch, at least.
Yeah, this is it's definitely one of the worst parts of the film, just that little scene. And even though it is just a little scene, it does kind of it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because it's just so horrible.
Got any other points on Laputa in your notes?
Yeah, just that it was very, very pretty.
Yeah. Yes, it's gorgeous. Everything the studio puts out is freaking gorgeous. They did a minimalist... Isao Takahata directed a minimalist sketch comedy film called My Neighbors the Yamadas, and that film is a visual delight as well, even though it's got very simplistic art style. I mean... like, you can do all sorts of things with minimalism. If you've ever seen a Don Hertzfeldt film, good example. If you haven't seen any Don Hertzfeldt films, you should watch some Don Hertzfeldt.
Could I ask whether this was... is this an expensive art
Yes.
style to do?
Yes, because it takes a lot of time and requires a lot of detail of painting on cells.
No, it's a shame.
Yeah, that's something when I was younger, in my late teens, and I was learning things about the art of filmmaking, and I was hanging around people who very much were pushing a narrative that I was agreeing with at the time. A certain degree of resentment towards Studio Ghibli films, because there's a lot of cuts that they do, in particular high-speed motion-heavy ones, where, like, it's really cool and it's flashy, and quite often they do support the narrative, but there's a certain degree of resentment at the fact that they're doing these cuts as much because they're the only ones in the country who could. They're the only ones who had the time and money in order to do so. But as I've gotten older, it's just, like, if you've got the opportunity, you damn well take it.
Yeah, I can't see any... all I could think when I was watching it was just like, even though I wasn't enjoying the story at all times, it was very, very pretty to look at.
Yep.
And I don't see any reason to disagree with what you were saying there. Like, if you can do it, why not?
Okay, one day I'll get you to watch My Number Totoro, but that's going to be your review of the entire film, that sentence.
And it's very pretty.
Yeah, and certainly you are having moments where you compared various games. You brought up Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild tonight. You brought up Eco.
Yeah.
You brought up a couple of others as well.
Yeah,
a general
brought up,
Nintendo sense, but yeah. It's because this film is a huge influence on a lot of people, on a lot of artists. It's awe-inspiring.
Well, I'm not an artist myself, but like, I can see why anyway. Like, it's gorgeous to look at. Like, and it's not just one particular thing. It's just the ocean that's great. It's not just the clouds. It's not just like the airships. Like the whole thing, just from start to finish, was just really well drawn. It's so pretty to look at. It reminded me a little bit of I'm not sure if this is like a Japanese animation version of like a mainstream AAA kind of Hollywood budget kind of film, in that it's like
Pretty much is.
yeah, yeah. Like it feels like this kind of thing you would say about one of those. Like,
Yeah.
Look at the special effects; they're fantastic. It's a bonanza. Maybe the story could have been, more complex or more interesting, or not as, in this case, not as confused.
And certainly for us fans in that time period, this was when Disney's putting out things like Oliver and Company. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one. It's the New York musical about a cat.
Wow.
It's dull.
Okay.
I don't think I'll go as far to say it sucks, but yeah, like, it's a very much an idea in the Disney creative process. And then meanwhile, people are saying, hey man, but if you check out Laputa, man, or if you get that real tape of Nausicaa, man, your mind's gonna be blown.
Well, it didn't blow my mind, and I didn't fully like it, but compared to the other animes I've watched, I didn't hate it, and it has some positives. And that would be what I would say.
And so we move on to Spirited Away, published by the Walt Disney Company in 2001, 2002-ish. It must have... Yeah, it was 2002 that the American release happened, because it was the 75th Awards, which from memory was the 2003 Awards, because it's like Chicago won Best Film that year. And certainly was... Like, there'd been lots of good animated films in that interim. Like, if we're talking between Laputa and Spirited Away, as far as Japanese content, there's Akira, there's... I guess we can bring up things like End of Ava, there's almost everything Satoshi Kon made. There's some really, really good films in between these two times, but none of them have really, really hit that mainstream. And so there was very much this opening of, hey, here's this really, really arty film, and if we publish this, then we will be attached to an Academy Award when we're kinda trying to bury Treasure Planet, and Lilo and Stitch is kind of underperforming. So, like I read to you earlier the best animated film nominations for that year, and Spirited Away won, but the other options were Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, the DreamWorks classic that I'm sure you remember, and of course, Ice Age. Frickin' Ice Age managed to get a nomination.
So, yeah.
So, like, you see those, and then suddenly here's this really, really semiotically rich film about adolescent personal growth with heavy use of a folklore that the Academy is completely unfamiliar with. And it's just, whoa! This is what an animated movie can be. Like, this real moment of awakening for a lot of people. Tell me about Spirited Away, man. Can you tell me the plot of this one?
Pretty sure I can. Basically, a little girl and her parents have moved. It seems like they're in the process of moving to
moving to the country.
To the country. And they take a little detour just to go on an adventure, or they get lost, doesn't really matter. And while they're exploring their surroundings, they go through a scary tunnel. And eventually...
what does the tunnel open to?
It opens up into a abandoned, or at least at that point, a kind of a state train station of some sort.
Yes, and what a train station's building on from last week. Say it. I need you to say it, boy.
A place of transition.
Yes!
And from there, they find themselves in a completely different world, and a world that has no one in it at this point, at least to them. And the parents find some food. They're very hungry. They didn't bring their lunch with them. They were upset that they didn't. I remember they said that. And so they decided to start eating the food. They say they have money in they have money in credit cards, they have cash, they can pay for it if someone does come along. The little girl who did not want them to go through the tunnel, did not want them to go through the train station, just wanted them to get back in the car and leave. I was never quite sure exactly why. Maybe it was just some kind of like sixth sense that she had.
Oh, it's also that she spent the entire time in the car complaining that they were moving in the first place. Like, she just wanted to go back home.
Yeah, that's very true. And she also doesn't want to eat the food either. She tells them not to, but they ignore her. They actually ignore her a lot. They're not very good parents. And eventually she goes off, and she meets a guy named Haku.
Mm-hmm. Like the wrestler.
Yes, like the wrestler. I guess.
Oh, you haven't seen any Haku matches? Oh man, I'll show you a promo of his later from his WCW run. It's a great promo. Anyway.
And so Haku tells her that this is a very dangerous place. He's very upset that she's there, and essentially tells her that she needs to leave before anyone else finds her. But then she runs back to her parents, only to find that they have turned into pigs.
Symbols of avarice itself.
Yeah, they've got the little minute chests on their heads now.
Dark Souls jokes? Man, we're going places.
And eventually, and after finding that her parents have turned to pigs, she runs away. She doesn't actually fully believe that her parents are pigs at first, but that turns out to be the case. And she finds herself just in a monster place. You said it best, a yokai kind of a land of yokai, and which I think is Japanese for demon or monster.
Yeah. So Japanese culture has heavy influence from Buddhism, but also the more local traditional religion is Shinto, which is an animistic religion, which means everything has a spiritual form. And indeed, if they gain enough spiritual power, then they can become deities.
And this is a bathhouse. This location that she's found is a bathhouse for deities. And the only way for her to survive in this world, or at least is what she's told from Aku, is that she has to work at the bathhouse and that she has to find a job there. Otherwise, these deities will literally either use her for energy or will eat her.
Yes, yokai like to eat humans. This is a very consistent thing. You remarked at one point during the film of, it seems like everyone either wants to help her or eat her. I didn't want to be talking too much during the film and let it just wash over you, but yes, that is how yokai go. Sometimes they're nice, but if they're mean, then they're generally known as ayakashi if they're particularly mean. And yeah, they like to eat people. Even the more benevolent ones, they think humans are tasty.
It reminds me a lot of more like Slavic kind of folklore, where you have a lot of deities that are either very, very helpful and nice, or they're just the worst monsters imaginable.
Yeah, it's pretty common. I'm quite a big fan of Arabic Jinni, and how they're either going to be screaming that they want you to die, or they're going to be screaming advice to you that you're going to ignore. Or there's a big bunch of demons which just like to scream.
So yeah, it's an interesting folklore, this Japanese yokai kind of thing. And okay, so now she's in the bathhouse. She's working there, and there's a lot of from there. She just has this little adventures in the bathhouse, trying to help out different deities. All the while, she's trying to find a way to bring her parents back to the human form and escape. And it's a little bit difficult to like sum up the movie from there, because there's a lot of just like
vignettes.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Because what I was going to say was meandering, but I didn't want to use that word because these are the parts of the movie I enjoyed the most.
Yeah, like unlike Laputa, which was a bit too focused on its action in order to really make its world building interesting. Like, this is pretty much nothing but world building.
And so, yeah, she goes through a few adventures in the bathhouse, eventually gets into a little bit of trouble with the leader of the bathhouse, which is a witch. And eventually she ends up getting into a bit of a drama with the witch's sister and her baby. This is the leader of the bathhouse baby. And eventually, after a very abrupt conclusion, she manages to save her parents. They get turned back into human beings, and they escape from the bathhouse.
Yay.
Yay.
And now she has grown as a person from this experience. Alright, let's get the first one out of the way. I guess this is a thing which usually doesn't pop up in Spirited Away discourse, though sometimes it does. Bathhouses. Hot springs. In the 18th and 19th century in Japan, they were quite commonly brothels. And the yubaba, literally translating to the spring hag, was the title given to the woman in charge of such brothels. So generally the term became associated with the pimp of the brothel. That is something that's floating around in the text of this film. And I guess the thing that really accentuates this is that as Chihiro finally finds an opportunity to get a job at the bath, Yubaba literally steals her name away. Like, you are my slave and your identity is the one that I will give you.
Yeah. Gosh, that's heavy. I didn't really know much about Japanese bathhouses, to be honest. I mean, I did get that the leader of the bathhouse was evil. I mean, I got that much. And I did get that she was a slave, that she was essentially a slave to her. God, what do I think of that? I don't know. I mean, I can tell that it's kind of there because, you know, there are...
Yeah, there's elements of there because there is this layer of exploitation going on, and it's... The location is specifically chosen since it is a female lead, and while it is very much like it's a pre-Meiji restoration thing, so it has moved out of general cultural awareness, but it is definitely a thing which, when you're making a film this heavy with its symbolism, like, that choice was intentional.
Well, she does lose her parents very early on, and then she becomes utterly dependent on this one guy, essentially, who tells her what to do, which is...
And then there's clients who go around dishing out money while consuming.
Yes, and clients, and then one of them eventually develops an unhealthy obsession with her, and wants to give her things, and just wants her, which is definitely a very common trope, at least in fiction, of prostitution and that kind of a thing. Probably also in real life as well, but I wouldn't pretend to be an expert. So I can see those kind of themes floating around now that you say that.
Yeah. There's the hot take for today. But like, if you do not know that this is the thing going on, like, the way this text works is completely comprehensible without it, as the story of personal growth and discovery. Something which is also a thing that annoyed me about this film most of the times that I've seen it, and it pops up in Laputa as well. There's a number of times where there's this general assertion in a lot of Japanese culture, in previous generations in particular, about, like, the sacred right of work. That, like, work is not only a normal thing, but, like, exchanging your labor in compensation for payment is, like, this good and proper thing that you must do to be a human. And, like, Chihiro will literally fade from existence if she does not acquire a job where she is exchanging her labor for payment. And there's also moments in Laputa where Pazu pops up and saying, like, to begin with, he's working in a job. That's normal. And there's points where the pirate's, like, testing his resolve and he says, I'm gonna prove it by working hard. It's this thing that pops up, and we're in a time where there are different voices coming through in Japanese popular culture, and we're seeing a shift away from this mentality, which is nice to see, but it's always something that put me in a bit of a bad mood when watching Spirited Away, is this vibe of, like, that growing as a person requires you to have been in a labor wage system.
Yeah, I think everyone will have, at some point in their lives, would hear about Japanese work culture and its issues. So I guess it's no surprise that something that is so ubiquitous in Japanese culture will crop up in movies made by Japanese people, even if it's in the background, or I'm sure there are some movies or pieces of fiction where it's like the centerpiece. I think with Spirited Away, it's kind of just floating around.
Yeah, it's a product of worldview rather than a specific direct theme.
Yeah, I guess all you can say is that, at least in this case, the movie, she's forced into it. It's not something that she seems to enjoy. It's something that she's forced into by a horrible, horrible villain. Unfortunately, doesn't receive much comeuppance, but they're still portrayed as a villain.
And everyone cheers when she loses, so that's something.
Exactly. And they cheer when she escapes. When she escapes later, her victory is not to escape to a life with more work. It's to escape a life with their parents and to be a kid again with.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you talked a lot about like personal growth, and I guess with her character, yes, but also in some ways she almost her victory is that she kind of gets to be young again because she has to grow up very, very fast in this bathhouse, and she has to do things that no young person should have to do. It's done in a adventure kind of way. So
it's an adventure way, so it's not you're literally having horrible exploitation. It's you're literally wading through poo mud.
And being in like physical danger, which is strangely enough because of the adventure and fictional aspect is not as bad as being shown like actual like slave labor exploitation. Yeah, but at the end of the movie, she gets to be a kid again with her parents.
Yeah,
which she's not being exploited anymore. So there is that, at least, to a spiritual way. Yeah, that's what I'd say to that. I would say, in a different, if I could change topic for a second, because we've been talking a lot about the themes of it and like the background elements.
Yep.
I really feel like my favorite part of this film is definitely the middle part.
Yes.
And I think what is interesting about the middle part of this film is that it's just, even though I wasn't really thinking too much about the themes it was portraying or anything like that, I was just really enjoying the moment to moment. And I felt like this was just a really fun setting to just explore and to engage with. I found like...
Would you like me to quote Rick McCallum, producer of the Star Wars prequel trilogy?
Oh god.
It's just so dense. Every frame has so much going on. That's not exactly true. It knows when... The pacing is so much better in this, and it does know how to have those moments to let you take a breath and soak it in, but yeah, like, there's so much that can capture your imagination here. Certainly one of the ways that I've complained about Ghibli films in the past, personally, is that I feel like I'm being beat over the head with whimsy in Hayao Miyazaki's films, rather than drawn in. And I think I'm old enough and craving raw emotional experiences enough now that it's like, now I'm having that feeling when I watch this film. That, oh hey, now I'm actually getting drawn in to see the creativity flow.
Yeah, definitely. I think this might, I don't know how well this is going to go over, but it was just something that I thought, so I'm going to bring it up. I actually felt this story would have been more suited to an episodic format, especially a TV show, where it just seems to be so set up so perfectly for a TV show. You are brought into this strange new world. In this case, it's a bathhouse. You've got your main goal, which is to escape with your parents, after turning them back into humans. That is your A-plot that will go through the whole season trying to do. And then in between, for every episode, you have a new deity or a new situation at the bathhouse. And I felt like the movie... It's funny because I complained a little bit about The Incredibles 2 recently, saying that it felt a little bit too much like a TV show, and that was a criticism. While with this movie, my favorite parts of it were the stuff where I was like, this is just like a TV show. This is just a plot of the week with the various deities they have to deal with. And they have to deal with a river god, I believe, which they thought
Yes, it was a river god who they thought was a stink god because it had been corrupted. And I mean... It's where the environmentalism message of Spirited Away kicks in, where it's been filled with pollution, so now it's a stink god. You clear out the pollution, and it's back to a happy river dragon.
Yeah. And the scene with No Face. Oh, well, there was not many scenes with No Face, but like that whole...
The culmination of No Face, which is really the climax of the film.
Yeah. that would have been... That was a better story, and I was saddened. We're kind of segueing now, but like I was saddened that there was no real ending to the No Face thing. Like I felt like I understood what No Face was, I understood what they were going for with it, but I feel like there was just like it lacked like a proper conclusion. I don't know if that's what you or other people have felt.
Yeah, like my feeling about this film is that it ends with that final chase with No Face. And then everything after that, rather than going on to a third act where you really accentuate... Really, the points of conflict there would be, will Haku continue to be Chihiro's friend when he is indentured to Yubaba? And the other thing is, I feel like it could have done more with the idea of, is going to see the other witch, Enyaba, the right decision. And so you have that tension as she's going towards her of, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is it better to be with the devil I do than the devil I don't? And then you discover that she's actually a kindly old lady. And then you have that moment of relief, followed by then, but now does Haku know this? And then you've got a climax and a resolution from there. But instead, you just have this long break period of, now we're gonna meet the nice lady, and she's nice. And then it turns out Haku's okay, because we've actually already fixed that problem. And then you just get this final, last little moment of tension with the final trial that Yubaba throws at Chihiro. And then it ends.
And that felt like an afterthought.
Yeah.
In some ways, the choose the right pig kind of scenario.
Yeah, because we've just spent like 25 minutes ignoring that sort of tension.
In some ways, that felt like, speaking of the TV show analogy, that felt like when you see a lot of TV shows, they'll have these plots of the week, and it's supposed to have an A plot as well, that an undercurrent of that. But then they just ran out of time, and so the last episode is really rushed.
Yep.
It kind of felt a bit like that.
Yeah, that Babylon 5 Season 5 situation.
Can I ask, do you know what was the runtime for this film?
Someone please pass me a copy of The Case. We have a live studio audience once again, by the way. Hope they're enjoying the show.
I am.
Oh, that's nice.
We have I have my first print DVD here with the American poster. Look at all these characters staring at the camera.
It's not a good poster. Or cover art, rather.
Yeah, 2 hours. It's 125 minutes. They were both about 2 hours.
I feel like, how much longer can a movie be before people start to get tired of it? Like, it feels like it needs more time.
Yeah, but that's only because it didn't really explore the things it could have done. Like, there's just this chunk of time that was misused, I feel.
Okay. Yeah.
There's just too long of a tension relief.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're talking about the scene where she gets onto the train tracks.
And it's like, just the idea, those brief moments where she's sitting on the train with no face are beautiful little sequences. It's just, it's the wrong time.
Which goes back to what we were saying before about things that are good in a vacuum, but in the context of the film don't quite work. Which I think are the toughest ones to criticize or get rid of, because on the one hand, you'll just, even yourself will get some enjoyment out of it. You'll be like, how can I criticize this thing that in the moment at least I'm enjoying? But I think you just have to be tough, and you have to say, look, this is not as good as this is. We have to break it down here.
It's the entire core of constructive criticism.
Yeah. And I think on the other side of it, as a filmmaker, this is where being tough on yourself as well, tough on your own creative project, and just saying, look, this is really good, but I have to delete this.
The eternal struggle of editors and directors. What's your next point, Matt, on your phone?
Well, I've kind of been moving around a little bit. Okay, well, the movie is worse when Haku is in it is actually my next point.
I agree.
Yeah.
He's so flat.
Yeah. And he's just an unnecessary part of the movie, I think. Like, I dislike him in every scene that he's in. Like, I do appreciate what you were saying, where he could have been interesting if he had been a bit more, what's the word for it?
Conflicted.
Unsure of his... Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unsure of his loyalties.
Yeah, like, he's established in the law as being an indentured servant of Yubaba, but he spends the entire film working against her, overtly. So there's no tension of whose side is he really on, or anything that would really add some dimension to him. It's just, he's this guy and he's really nice. Shame about that slavery. Oh, we fixed it, because I remembered he's the river god. That's the other thing that drives me nuts, is that during that tension relief, it pays off an idea that was never set up. She just starts saying, hey, I think I remember seeing you before, but this doesn't play into events in the early stages of the first act. So it comes up, that is very close to being an actual Deus Ex Machina situation, where a god appears and just fixes everything. It's just, by the way, I'm this.
Yeah, so he's not very good in those later scenes, but he's also, he really dislikes his first appearance. Well, his very first appearance, probably not so bad, where all he does is just...
Go away! Go away!
Like, that just adds to the tension. I still don't think he's necessary, though. Like, she could have seen other monsters and realized by herself that this is not a good situation at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's amazing to me just how little his presence adds to the film at any stage. I'm not sure if anyone else can think of a point in this film where he was absolutely necessary, where he could not have been cut out. Especially in the second scene where he shows up, where he starts giving her exposition about how this all works, and essentially just tells her what to do.
Yep.
Which
I guess you could say it's a part of her development that she begins being told what to do all the time, and then she finally develops her own sense of direction and agency, but it's really just that final trial. The rest of the time, people tell her what to do and she does it.
Yeah. And, she could have been told by someone else. She could have been running around or, like, hiding. They had something with her that if she breathes, they will see her.
Yep.
Yeah, you could either cut that out or you could have her find that out herself. Maybe instead of, like, there's a scene where Haku, the frog, notices her.
Yes.
She breathes and he does some sort of spell on her.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry. First of all, I just hate his spells so much in this film. Like, so many, like, problems are just, like, resolved immediately by just snapping his fingers and then everything is fine. I hated that so much. And there's a bit, like, where he just, like, flies with her. Like, they're about to be discovered by a bunch of monsters. Just like, oh, okay, we'll just fly away.
But it's evocative of that scene in Laputa where they did the same thing. Feel the magic. XYXX.
I mean, she could have just, like, the frog could have, like, as soon as maybe she was holding her breath because, like, I don't know, like, she was scared, and then she lets it out and the frog notices her.
Mm-hmm.
And she could just punch the frog in the face or something like that, or throw it away, or she runs away. Like, anything. Like, she could have found a lot of the things that she was told out herself. And I just think that would have been more interesting to do.
Yep.
And he's just, as you say, just so boring. Like, he's
basically a lamp.
Yeah. He's that mandated male character that just has to be there. And it just would be so much more. He's like that guy from that Godzilla movie, where it's just like, we have to have military man in this Godzilla movie, even though every other character is more interesting. And I can't help but feel like the same way with that, and everything else. Most media seems to need this very, like, this middle-aged, or maybe kind of young, white male character who is somewhat actiony, somewhat dark, and he's just not needed at all in this story, and I don't like him.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah. I think I don't really have that many more points, just because I think the main thoughts that I had during it was just that episodic feel, and just how much more I enjoyed this film when it was just dealing with little problems in the bathhouse.
I guess the thing I'll mention there is that one of the things that I love about animistic folk traditions is that they provide episodes upon episodes upon episodes of content that you can produce with this sort of thing. And indeed, I am a real sucker for yokai-heavy stories. I like the Toho franchise because it's one man doing very wacky reinterpretations of folklore like this. There's a series called Gegege no Kitaro, which is an action series about a yokai who goes around beating up other yokai. It gets a remake every decade. In fact, this decade's remake is happening as we speak. Because, hey, you got all these cool spirits that you can come up with crazy ideas with. I mean, here's the Rat Man. Here's a woolly eyeball. It's an eyeball that's got fur around it and it flies. Here's a possessed umbrella. So if an umbrella gains enough spiritual power to become manifested as a yokai, it means that it gets one eye, it gets a mouth with a tongue, and its purpose in life is to surprise people.
I don't know how to respond to this.
And so the Toho interpretation of this is, it's a stage 2 mid-boss that you beat up very easily and you laugh at it. And you go, guess I surprised the umbrella by beating it up. And then, in the bonus post-game level, it pops up as a boss there. And you go, oh shit, she surprised me.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. And actually, I would say that what it reminds me of is, and I'm sure they would have said this, is The Witcher, which is a very similar thing, I think, with its folklore monsters, where one of the most fun parts of The Witcher to me is just like it doing interesting takes on fairy tales and very interesting takes on Slavic folklore. And I think it is interesting to show that pieces of genre fiction that use a kind of fantastical stuff that isn't like the usual werewolves or vampires or maybe Greek mythology. There's just so much more interesting mythologies or folklores out there. And it's always interesting and fun to see movies or video games or whatever it is, using folklores that most people might not be that knowledgeable in.
Yep.
And that's all I really have to say.
That's cool. Like, we've gone over an hour, so I think that's a good thing. I guess the final closing question I'll have for you is how you feel about either of these films changed over the course of us talking about them and unpacking your thoughts a bit more?
I don't think much changed with
Laputa.
Clearly nothing has changed with Laputa because I still can't get the title right. Nothing much has changed with Laputa. With Spirited Away, I didn't think of the kind of prostitution kind of angle very much. And I do think that that has given me a better appreciation of the movie, actually. And I guess in general, I would say that this Spirited Away, especially this is someone, just from me personally, I've not liked anime in such a long time. I very said that last podcast, but I should say it here because this was probably, Spirited Away is probably the most engaging anime that I've watched for a very long time. And it did not make me angry at the end. It made me be disappointed that it ended so abruptly. I think you had some really good points about how Act 3 kind of, it wasn't even a
There isn't really there.
Yeah, which is a problem, but there's a difference between... I've so hated so many animes that I've watched recently. And I say recently, but just actually for the last few years. Like, always...
For all your life.
For all my life, since Cowboy Bebop. Where I'm not just disappointed in it, but I'm actually, like, mad at it. I think it's, like, actual trash. Like, this is so fucking terrible that watching two animes where I obviously like Spirited Away a lot more than Laputa, but I did not hate them. And that simple fact is amazing to me, which has made me quite happy that I did not hate either of these two movies.
So would you like me to show you more next week?
I don't know, do you want to push our luck?
Well, I think we'll find an opportunity to do so. Yeah, we'll leave that mysterious hanging thread of what will I make Matt watch next week. We'll find out when the next shows go up. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.